2014 recap finally. It's an hour long, so get your people blankies. Let's go. So where did we leave off? I'm already pausing. We're 4 seconds in. Where did we leave off 2013? What was the end of 2013? Dragon Ruler, Ravine Ruler, right? That's where we're at. Thank you to the person in chat saying we left off with 2013. That's I knew that. I knew that okay. Thank you. Okay, yeah. 6th Sense Ravine Ruler. Yeah, okay.
As we exited 2013, a Tier 0 menace was raging on. With the last 2 YCSs of the year, we saw Dragon Rulers absolutely take over for a second time that year, with the main culprit this time being that of 6th Sense, which allowed you to
Is there echo? Oh, I can turn down my speakers a little bit.
completely set up off its activation regardless of the roll's result. With such an oppressive card causing a Tier 0 reign for Dragon Rulers right at the end of the year, a ban list would be put in place on January 1st, 2014, and knowing that, the hit shouldn't be surprising. Newly banned were Dragon Ravine, Return from the Different Dimension, and
Dude, I did not remember that Dragon Ravine was a banned card. That's wild. Like, looking back at Ravine Ruler format, 6th Sense and Return absolutely deserved to get banned at that time. Ravine? I didn't even remember this.
6th Sense. All hits at Dragon Ruler, as well as Self-Destruct Button, a card that simply had caused too many headaches.
But that's a super duper lame hit, by the way. That is like such a... You should have just hit the Dragon Ruler hit, basically, is what that is. Just hit the rulers.
For tournament play to remain legal. Newly limited were all 4 Dragon Rulers, Debris Dragon, and
if they limited all the rules, they did not need to ban Ravine.
Sword of 7 Stars, as hits to Dragon Ruler.
I don't
Divine
think.
Wind of the Mist Valley in response to a couple of FTK brews that were popping up using Harpy Dancer. Final Countdown is a hit to the popular stall deck. Spellbook
Popular stall deck,
of Fate is a hit to Spellbook's remaining best card, and Magician of Faith returning from the ban section to 1 copy. Newly semi-limited were Chaos Sorcerer and Lone Fire Blossom, both coming back from limited. Lastly, newly unlimited were Archlord Christia, Constellar Ptolemy M7, Mizuki, Plague Spreader Zombie, TG Striker, Tour Guide from the Underworld, and Fire Formation Tenki, being a wave of cleanup from when the OCG and TCG lists were linked. Overall, this ban list did one thing major, which was killing the Tier 0 version of Dragon Rulers, knocking out a majority of the heavy hitters from the deck, as well as cracking down on some of the more toxic cards for events like Countdown and Self-Destruct Button. In addition to this, the Zexal Mangas Volume 4 would release...
Besides the unnecessary hit to Dragon Ravine, that was still a pretty good ban list.
A week later,
overall,
bringing
it was
number
pretty
47
good.
Nightmare Shark, a direct attacking rank 3 option that would see niche play for now, but became a lot more relevant later in the year as a game closer. As the first event of the year, YCS Sydney would take place on January 19th, and would ring in the year with no Dragon Ruler decks appearing in the top cut known lists, a first from the previous half a year. The field here had devolved a bit back to the tendencies of the pre-Dragon Ruler era, with Fire Fist being the standout deck of the event, although notably when I say Fire Fist, I primarily mean a Beast Warrior control pile with Fire Fist Bear at the center, so take that with a grain of salt. Anders Co. would take the event on Teleport Karakuri, being a surprise run for the deck to take in the...
I remember Anders. Anders is a really nice guy. He showed us around Japan when I was there for the very first time in 2012. I don't even remember why he was there, but he just was. I think he was a translator at the time. And he was very nice. He gave us like some tours around Japan.
Newly weakened metagame, but the meta would soon solidify around its big threats in Fire Fist and Mermail once again as it had in pre-Tachyon formats. This led us into the first core set of the year, and with the meta in a newly reset position, any new strategy with enough support could easily take the spot of the new top deck. Legacy of the Valiant. Release date, January 24th, 2014.
Oh, dude, Silent Honor Arc was such a cool card.
Set type, core set. Major strategies, Sylvan, Ghost Trick, Bushin. Impact, a clear push, but not a breakthrough. Legacy of the Valiant would be the first core set of the year, and with it would come both a new archetype as well as a wave of support for 2 archetypes from the tail end of 2013 to try and change something about their position in the metagame. The new archetype was Sylvan, a series of plant monsters that also brought with them a new keyword to the game in the form of Excavate.
Don't tell this to Patrick Hoban, but Bujin was never that good. Don't tell him that, though.
in which you reveal a set number of cards from the top of your deck to do an effect. Many previous cards that did this, such as Pot of Duality, would also be errataed in the coming months to reflect this change. As for Sylvans, each of the main deck monsters had two effects, one that lets you excavate a certain number of cards and send plants you find to the graveyard, putting the rest back on bottom of the deck, and the other triggering when excavated and sent to grave. These included Peacekeeper.
What did Duality say before? I think it was just like, I don't know, reveal the top 3 and then shuffle them back in or something like that.
Who could excavate 1 on summon and revive a level 4 lower plant if excavated, Kumashurmo, who excavated up to 5 on being flipped and pops a spell trap when excavated, Martial Leaf, who excavates up to 2 on normal and pops a monster if excavated, Hermitry, who can excavate 1.
Hoban played Sylvan, not Bujin. Oh, that's what I meant. I meant Sylvan. Did I say Bujin? I meant Sylvan. Sylvan was like... Sylvan, to me, it was a cool deck. It was fun. I just never thought it was that good. And I still don't think it really was good at the time. It was just really high rolly. And basically, it was around that time that, like, there was, like, Patrick Hoban was, like, propagating this idea of you need, like, maximum ceiling. Whatever deck can do the most is the best deck. And all that stuff, you know? And Sylvan was, like, if it worked, it was the highest ceiling, basically. But it didn't work that often. it wasn't that good, really.
Once per turn, and can rearrange the top 3 of your deck when excavated. Also, a rank 8 that can declare a card name once per turn to excavate and either add it to hand if called correctly or send it to the grave if not, and can detach 1 when a card is sent from deck to grave by card effect to put a card on field on either the top or bottom of the deck, and their field spell Mount Sylvania, which can send a plant from hand or field to grave to stack a Sylvan card from deck on top of the deck, and during the opponent's end phase, can excavate 1 like the Sylvan monster effects. This archetype had a lot of good bones to it, but the issue primarily lied in that all of their consistent lines required access to Hermitry, who was level 8. This could be offset slightly thanks to the recent semi-limit of Lone Fire Blossom, but general plant support could only take the strategy so far for now. Ghost Trick would receive a new wave of support here in Jack Frost, who can summon itself when the opponent attacks you directly, flipping the attacking monster face down, Mary, who can be discarded when you take damage to summon a Ghost Trick from deck face down, Dullahan, a rank 1 that gains attack for each Ghost Trick you control and can detach 1 on either player's turn to have a monster's attack that turn, able to cycle a Ghost Trick when sent to grave, and Museum, a field spell that prevents set monsters from being attacked, lets monsters attack directly if all opposing monsters are set, and flips any monster that deals battle damage face down. Ghost Trick would continue to see no standalone success, but this wave would bring enough useful stall pieces to the archetype that it would see some consideration as a splash engine into other decks that needed more stall and swarm tools, like Monarch.
Visual error? Wait, what was the error? I didn't catch it.
Monsters attack directly if all opposing monsters are set, and flips any monster that deals battle damage face down. Ghost Trick would continue to see no standalone success, but this wave would bring enough useful stall pieces to the archetype that it would see some consideration as a splash engine into other decks that needed more stall and swarm tools, like Monarch. Bujin would receive another wave here in Arasuda, a Beast Warrior Bujin that can summon itself when a Bujin is banished from field or grave, and can draw 1 and discard 1 if a Bujin was added from deck to hand that turn. Peacock, who can send itself from hand to grave in main phase 2 to search a Bujin. Hare, who can banish itself from grave on either player's turn to protect a Bujin from destruction once that turn. And Tsukiyomi, a light-locked rank 4 that can detach 1 to send your hand to the grave to draw 2 cards, and can summon Beast Warrior Bujins from grave up to the number of materials it had when removed by the opponent's card effect. Bujin, already being in a decent position following the January 1st ban list, would take the support and run with it to be a solid potential strategy in the upcoming metagame, and this support did a lot to reinforce that. Moving into notable standouts, Kalantosa would be a very notable inclusion for the level 2 Earth Beast strategy, able to pop a card on field.
It's really... Now that I'm seeing all this set really wasn't all that great. I mean, we're going to talk about Exciton Knight and Honor Arc in a second. Those are like generically good staples, but all of the archetypes here, I feel like we're kind of lackluster overall. Like they had competitive impact, but only really because they had killed everything or like a lot of the stuff that was previously actually good. And people didn't really know what else to play. And then secretly, honestly, in 2014, the best decks are still the decks from before Dragon Rulers. Like it was not people wanted to play the new stuff and they maybe thought it was better, but it wasn't. Like you look back at this and you're like, okay, technically after this you should still only be playing like Mermail, Firefist, and and Infernity, right? Like, you shouldn't be playing those new decks technically from a competitive standpoint.
This would also be complemented by Obedience Schooled, able to summon 3 level 2 or lower beasts from deck with their effects negated, being an excellent starter for that strategy too. Tackle Crusader could, when sent to grave, flip a monster face down or bounce a spell trap the opponent controls to hand, being a solid piece in rock decks moving forward. In the same vein, Gorgonic Guardian is a rock-locked rank 3 that can, on either player's turn, detach to drop an opponent's monster's attack to 0 and negate its effects that turn. Also able to, on your turn only, destroy a monster with 0 attack. While incredibly powerful, the rank 3 rock restriction was just a bit too much at the time for the card to see play, but it would see rogue level experimentation in later 2016 with another archetype getting legacy support. The generic extra deck pool itself would see a bunch of new additions here that would shape the meta moving forward, such as number 101 Silent Honor Arc, a generic rank 4 that can detach 2 materials to suck up an opponent's special summoned attack position monster as material, bringing one of the best removal tools to the rank 4 pool. I say one of because released alongside Arc was Evil Swarm Exciton Knight, a generic rank 4 that could, once per chain...
Now this card was genuinely crazy at the time. Like, Honor Arc was good and everyone played Honor Arc, but Exciton was insane.
In your main phase or the opponent's battle phase, if the total number of cards your opponent has on field and in hand is more than you, nuke the field except for itself, being one of the best rank 4s due to either being a setup breaker or providing a layer of protection going into the opponent's turn, demanding a removal prior to the battle phase. Lastly, for the Exceed pool would be Downward Magician, a spellcaster locked rank 4 that can also be overlaid onto any rank 3 in the main phase too, giving 200 for each material and dealing piercing damage, being a solid option for rank 3 decks to convert their used Exceed monsters. In addition to the Exceed pool additions, the generic Synchro pool would also receive Leo, Keeper of the Sacred Tree, a level 10 Synchro that cannot be targeted by card effects except in your main phase 2, becoming the premier level 10 generic Synchro overnight. Rank Up Magic Astral Force is a spell that can target an Exceed to overlay another Exceed onto, that is the same type and attribute but 2 ranks higher, and can be added from grave to hand.
How much was Exciton when it came out? I want to say like 90, maybe 100. It had SP little. It had SP Little Knight levels of expensive for sure. Like it would fluctuate a little bit, but it was definitely up there. Like I believe in the early weeks after the release, you could maybe get him for like 70, 80. I don't know exactly, but then eventually I think it was $100 because it was like almost every deck played 1, and some decks, because of how good it was, even played 2, I think. Yeah.
Normal draw for turn. Not seeing any play now, but would find an incredibly interesting niche in the coming months. Shared Ride lets you draw a card every time the opponent adds a card from deck or grave to hand, except by drawing, being a searcher equivalent to Max C, seeing side deck play in certain formats where searchers are extremely heavily played. Lastly, Skill Prisoner can target a monster you control to negate any monster effect that targets it that turn, able to be banished from grave to do it again, seeing niche use against certain strategies. YCS Atlanta would be held a week later on February 2nd, and this event would be the first of many this year.
Yeah, see, there you go. Not even, the format isn't even solved yet, but people already know, like, oh yeah, you shouldn't be playing this new stuff. Like, it's all kind of bad. Bujin was like, all right, but yeah.
We're going to refer to as half-sealed events. For context, this year specifically, we'd see almost every YCS that took place in North America run a standard constructed event until top 16, at which point all players would swap to doing a draft event using whatever the current battle pack was, being War of the Giants for this event. This meant that the top 32 would still be indicative of what decks were performing the best in the meta, but it doesn't mean that the deck that won the event would be the best deck of the event, rather what the winner used to reach top 16. With all of that preamble out of the way, Fire Fist, or more specifically the Bear deck as Konami's official coverage refers to it, would continue to take the lion's share of the top cut, even being piloted by Christian Jorge, who would take first place here after the top 16 draft. Yugioh was the other very notable standout here, rising into a dominant position with the discovery of Yugioh gear being able to swarm with the Yugioh pieces, standardly being mixed in with Car Curry tuners for synchro access. Hieratic would crack into the top cut with multiple showings here, though notably was the Hieratic Ruler variant in all cases. The Dragon Rulers had found their next core to latch onto and ride into meta.
This deck was so fun. This deck was so fun, and this is a rare. I want to say this is a rare Josh Market W, so we have to talk about this one because they don't happen very often. This Hieratic Seal of the Ashes trap card that you see right here is a continuous trap that lets you return banished, I believe, banished dragons to the graveyard and lets you foolish Hieratics from the deck. So it like loads up your graveyard to keep bringing back the Dragon Rulers. And it was a secret rare that ever since it's been printed, which I don't even know when that was, has not seen a single ounce of play. No one has ever played that card. And it was like Galactic Overload, yeah, something like that. Galactic Overlord. It was like a 50-cent secret rare or something like that at the time. And I picked these up because I was sometimes talking to Patrick Hoban at the time via like Facebook Messenger or something like that. And he would, I think it was his idea. I don't remember exactly, but he told me about like, he asked me like, what do you think of this card? You know, I was thinking about building hieratic with this and so on and so forth. And so I went ahead and I ordered some, only 3 though. I only ordered 3 for myself. I didn't do a marketing move, but that thing went up like crazy after this deck topped. This might even be Patrick Hoban's list. I don't know. It has upstarts, so it could very well be. But yeah, that was one of the rare market Josh market W's, because I knew he was going to play that deck, and I picked up that card because it wasn't very expensive.
Viability, though this time was notably less powerful due to only having one of each ruler at their disposal, relying more heavily on the hieratic side of the deck to do the heavy lifting and swarming. This would lead into the year's first structure deck a week later, which would itself set the trend that this year of structure decks is going to be exclusively focused on bringing new support to previously introduced archetypes, starting with a GX era staple.
The Cyber Dragon structure is from 2014, really.
Cyber Dragon Revolution. Release date, February 7th, 2014. Set type, structure deck. Major strategies, Cyber Dragon. Impact, a couple of specifically useful cards. Cyber Dragon Revolution was the first of 3 structure decks this year aimed at taking a meta strategy, or in this case a singular card, and making a full modern strategy out of it. In the case of Cyber Dragon, the idea was to make swarming with them far easier to enable Exceed plays. Their new cards here included Core, who's considered Sidra on field and engrave, search to Cyber Spell Trap on normal, and could, if your opponent controls a monster and you don't, banish itself from grave to summon a Cyber Dragon monster from the...
I don't even think this deck had any impact until we got Infinity a year later. I don't remember people playing this deck much, or at all, really.
That could detach to summon a Sidra from grave, can banish a Sidra from hand or field to boost itself by 2100 that turn, and floats into a machine fusion on effect destruction by the opponent, and
no, Maxi is still at 3. It was in the side deck in the other deck list. It's still at 3. It's hard, and this is hard to comprehend for modern Yu-Gi-Oh players. Back then, Maxi was not always an auto-include at 3. We're starting to get to the position where it will be soon in these recaps, but historically we are at a point in Yu-Gi-Oh where the card is not yet always insane, because there is a lot of decks, especially in this format. Against Fire Fist, Maxi is not good. They normal summon and pass a lot of the times. Maxi is only good on like Wolfbark, maybe if they play the Rescue Rabbit version of like Fire Fist with vanilla. Some people did that, some madmen. But like the average outcome with Maxi against Fire Fist is you either never get to use it, you maybe get a 1-for-1 out of it, and if you wait very long, maybe you get maximum a +1. So like the card isn't actually that good in this format.
Plant, which can use one effect if you have a Sidra in grave.
We're not even talking about
being to search a light machine or shuffle back a light machine into deck
never really.
While this didn't turn Cyber Dragon into its own viable standalone strategy for the meta, it did do a couple of interesting things. The first was Core, as by being a Cyber Dragon that you could normal summon and ducks under bottomless, it became a side deck option to use against machine decks to make Chimera Tech Fortress Dragon without risking tripping back row. The second was Nova, as while it wouldn't be played at all for the time being, Nova was one of those cards that would be broken wide open in early 2016 for reasons out of its control, but we'll get to those soon enough. Reprints here included Sidra, Cyber Valley, Super Poly, MST, Trap Stun, and D-Prison, to name a few. YCS Berlin would be held 2 weeks later, and from the results here, the Bear deck and Mermail would split the main portion of the representation, with Alpay Engine taking first place using a trap-heavy Reckless Greed build of Mermail. YCS Sao Paulo would be held 2 weeks.
Hold up. Dude, I topped YCS Berlin with no sleep. It was like I had a really rough start to YCS Berlin. Is this a Dweller? No, this is not the Dweller, sorry. At YCS Berlin, I was X2 really early. And at the time, you needed to go X2 to top. And so I won all the rounds towards the end of day 1. But for some reason, I wasn't really feeling it. I wasn't really feeling confident at that tournament because I lost twice relatively early. And I don't know. So when the others were like, after day 1 of YCH Berlin, they were like, yeah, we're going to go out. Are you going to join us? I was like, yeah, yeah, sure. And so we went out. I wasn't really able. I didn't sleep. And then on the next day, I also couldn't really speak. Which is a whole nother issue when you're trying to play Yu-Gi-Oh. And so like I for somehow I ended up winning out on day 2, and terrible idea, by the way. Don't do that. And like I lost. I won top 32, and I played Mermail. And this is not something to be proud of, by the way. Well, playing Mermail is something to be incredibly proud of, but doing what I did is not something to be proud of. But then in top 16, what I'm trying to get to is the reason I lost in top 16 is so freaking embarrassing because I was so tired. I played against Fire Fist, and I made Exiton. And they fiendish chained my Exiton when I activated it, right? And the way Exiton is worded, it's actually not once per turn, but it's once per chain. So it's not like Zeus, where you can go effect, they try to negate it, you chain it again. But you can technically activate Exiton, and then later on you can activate it again, right? So what I did, my opponent had like 2 set cards and like a bunch of monsters, and I summoned Exiton, used the effect, they fiendish chain it. I summoned Dracosac, and I pop like one of the monsters instead of popping the fiendish chain and using Exiton again, instantly winning the game. And so that's how I lose. Like that was game 3, I think. So yeah, I threw really hard because I hadn't slept the night before, which was really annoying.
Held 2 weeks later, and from the results here, the Bear deck and Mermail would split the main portion of the representation, with Alpay and Jean taking first place using a trap-heavy, Reckless Greed build of Mermail.
Yeah, this is almost what I played, because Alpay and I were in the same team at the time.
With
I played, I don't know if the list wasn't the exact same, probably, but like it was. There, I think there's a deck profile out there, but it was the I was also playing Reckless Greed Mermail. This was the only time in my entire however many years of playing Yu-Gi-Oh that I have activated 3 Reckless Greeds in one turn at a tournament. I just opened 3 Reckless Greeds in like round 10 or something like that, going first. So I just like Omega killed them the turn after. It was crazy. They were really mad.
Jean taking first place using a trap-heavy, Reckless Greed build of Mermail. YCS Sao Paulo would be held 2 weeks later, and while this event was also a half-draft event, the draft would be everything before top 16, so the decks listed here did not necessarily earn a spot in the top cut by the deck's merits, so take the top cut here with a grain of salt. Carlos Araujo would take the event on always, able to take down 4 rounds in a row in the slimmed-down matchup spread. YCS Chicago would be 2 weeks after this, and it was back to using Sealed to play out from top 16, so the top 32 decks here did earn their top spots themselves. Yugioh took a sizable portion of the top cut here, once again rivaling the Bear deck and Mermail, with Bujin once again close behind the pack. Tom Mock would take the event, using Bujin to claim his top 16 position before the draft, moving the deck away from its stun roots to a more Exceed-focused strategy with Bujin Carnation covering its board flooding. This event would be directly before the year's Gold Series, and while the past few years had hit a solid groove with the sets, this year's would be different to say the least.
Is that an example of a good diverse format? Fire Water? I like, okay. Technically, yes. I do think Fire Water format is a good format to go back into, and it is potentially a format that has the potential to become a very cool Time Wizard format. Because there is, so if you ask me, there was only really one deck during that time, and that was Water. I loved Mermail. If you asked others, they would answer the same thing, but they would say Fire instead because they preferred Fire. Those were like the 2 main things, the 2 main questions, like, do you play Fire or do you play Water, amongst like really competitive players at the time. But I think secretly, neither Mermail nor Fire Fist are so good that they completely exclude everyone else from playing something different, right? You can play a lot of other stuff in that format and succeed with it. They're not better than Fire Water, but they're like still very, very good. And then there's Infernity, which is kind of annoying because Infernity was like secretly, I think during a large portion of 2014, Infernity is like secretly really, really good, but people didn't really realize it until it wins Worlds this year. But Infernity is kind of crazy, and I think that is one of the decks that could ruin like Time Wizard format, because Infernity is Infernity is, it's a cool deck. I like it, but I it's not that great. Post Soul Charge Infernity was the best by far. Yeah, maybe it's until Soul Charge when yeah, and people don't really, that's the thing. When there's so many decks in Yu-Gi-Oh, like people don't always revisit everything immediately, right? There's like not one card that comes out and people go, oh, this card would be really good in this deck from 3 years ago, right?
Premium Gold. Release date,
Diabells.
March 28th, 2014. Set type, reprint set. Major strategies, the meta of the past year, OCG imports, all previous Gold series.
Well, not the gimmick
Impact, a
puppets.
new take on the Gold series formula. Premium Gold would be the first full shakeup of the Gold series formula, not by introducing new rarities, although it did introduce the new Gold Secret Rare, but also by importing OCG
Gold
cards
Secret?
in the set in addition to the reprints it normally provided, which included a block of 10 cards from each of the previous Gold series and 21 new to Gold Rare cards. While most of these imports held no impact, there were a couple in particular that were notably impactful, specifically in Beals of the Diabolic Dragon, a Dark Tuner locked level 8 synchro that can't be destroyed in battle and gains attack equal to any damage you take, being a solid inclusion for any dark deck that can make it. In addition to this, Ancient Pixie Dragon would be the manga counterpart to Ancient Fairy Dragon, drawing 1 after activating a field spell and can pop a monster on field if a field spell is active. Lastly for the imports would be the Gimmick Puppet monsters, which we've seen some of previously, but here we would finally receive
I hate
Druid
Gimmick
Doll.
Puppet artworks, man. They all make me uncomfortable. Why did they make these?
You can special summon herself from grave by banishing another Gimmick Puppet from grave. Magnet Doll, able to special summon itself from hand if your opponent has more monsters than you and you only
That's the
control Gimmick
idea.
Puppet.
Yeah, but I don't like the idea.
And Junk Puppet, an archetypal revival spell, which gave Gimmick Puppets the material to actually consistently summon their rank 8s, though would still be notably weak in the meta. Reprints here included Lone Fire, Honest, Veiler, Light Pulsar, Dark Flare, Eclipse Wyvern, Fire Fist Tiger King, Solar Recharge, Forbidden Chalice, Forbidden Lance, Tenki, Rhoda.
Dude, looking back at it, the more we watch these, by the way, the more I realize they've always been hella late with these reprints. I don't know why we're even surprised at this point anymore. Like, why after playing this game for 20 years are we still surprised that the reprints are like 2 years late? Freaking Chaos Dragon reprints in 2014? That deck's been good in 2012.
Mirror Force, Torrential, Dad, Caius, Goldsark, Minecon, Bottomless, Judgment
almost
Dragon,
all of these.
Mizuki, Plague Spreader, Ryo, Stardust, Armor Master, Armed Wing, Icarus Attack, Morphing Jar, BLS, Chaos Sorcerer, Raikou, Celestia, and Summoner Monk. In addition to this, a new ban list would drop 3 days later on April 1st, attempting to shake up the meta manually, as the past few sets seem to have done nothing to change what decks were good. Newly banned were Morphing Jar 1 and 2, which was directly targeted at Empty Jar, a rogue-level annoyance that never seemed to crack the YCS circuit in recent months, though notably this ban came directly following Morphing Jar's reprint in Premium Gold. Newly limited were Wolf Bark, a hit to the Bear deck, Abyss Gund, a hit to Mermail, Rekindling, a hit towards fire decks in general, but more so targeted at Fire King, and Infernity Barrier, a hit to Infernity. Newly semied were Seal of Convocation, a hit to Dragon Ruler's current best build, and Necroface, returning from 1. Lastly, unlimited were Magical Stone Excavation and Primal Seed, 2 points of cleanup.
That's a very weird ban list because it doesn't really change anything. It's only like very, very slight hit on the wrist, basically. Like one Gund is like, I didn't even remember they did that.
Overall, these hits were effectively slaps on the wrist for most of the top performing decks in the meta, though notably
You say late, I say early for Time Wizard. Fair enough, fair enough.
lacked any hits towards Geargia, which was about as old, if not older, than the other decks getting hit. YCS Mexico City would be the testing grounds following the new list, being another sealed top 16, and notably the top 32 for the most part remained unchanged, with the same 4 decks taking the majority of representation yet again. Alejandro Suarez would take the event through the sealed draft, using Mythic Rulers to pilot himself into the top 16, seeing another Dragon Ruler variant that could still compete following the January list, though he did not make his list public. YCS Vegas would be a week later, using the same draft format that would be standard for all draft events for the remainder of the year, and following the success of Mythic Rulers in Mexico City, the deck would rise a bit into the 3rd place representation.
Should they bring back this sort of draft style thing? I don't know. On the one hand, I like draft. I think it's very fun. On the other hand, what I find weird is doing this sort of 50-50 split. I find that weird. Like, if I want to go to a draft tournament, I want to go to a tournament that is entirely draft. If I want to go to a constructed tournament, I want to go to a tournament that's entirely constructed. I don't know. Maybe that's not that bad. The problem is I haven't played in one of these right? I haven't played in one of these tournaments, the 50-50 ones, basically. So the way that these worked, in case that wasn't clear, is I believe it was the Swiss portion. You go to the YCS with your own deck and you play Swiss rounds. And then if you make it into the top 32, you basically don't need your deck anymore, because then you get booster packs from Battle Pack and you build your deck with those. Or you draft, I don't know exactly if it was draft or sealed, whatever. You get the idea. You basically have top cut with those. Other way around? Maybe is it the other way around? Oh, was it? Are you sure? I don't think it was the other. I'm pretty sure it was Swiss with real decks. Because maybe the reason was they didn't want to deal with drafting with 1,000 people or something like that. Right? Maybe there was one both ways. It doesn't really matter. You guys get the idea. Whatever. Yeah. And the only one that I know personally is I've went to YCS Brussels, which was in 2013. We've looked at that recap already. And that was a YCS where it was only sealed. You didn't have to bring a deck, basically. You got battle packs and you built your deck with those. And that was pretty fun. I know that. It was pretty fun.
Presentation slot. Yugioh and Mermail would continue to take those lion's shares of the top cut, but notably, Firefist would see a rapid decline in its top cut performance following the limit of Wolfbark, which in turn limited the amount of recursive rank 4s the deck could make. Denny Yu would be crowned the winner following the sealed draft, making it to top 16 using Heraldic Ruler, being another example of the ruler strategy's relevance still remaining
Influence
in Whispers
Dragon.
in the meta. This would lead to a new import set series premiering 2 weeks later, and though for the most part the OCG import sets up until now have been mostly unimpactful, this one was going to completely upend the balance of the meta as we knew it by introducing multiple meta warping threats.
Ooh, Kuri Bandit was really cool. Oh, my boy, Mathematician.
Dragons of Legend. Release date, April 25th, 2014.
Oh, no. Oh, no, not that one. Not that one.
Major strategies, Timaeus, hands. Impact, the beginnings of a beloved format. Dragons of Legend would be the first set in a long line of OCG import sets themed to the legendary dragons from the Season 4
format? Dude, I'm gonna get some haters when we watch the hat format portion right now. I'm not a fan of hat.
Of the original Yu-Gi-Oh!
I hated hat
As
format.
such, the primary card featured for this set would be the Eye of Timaeus, a spell that lets you fuse a Dark Magician monster into a fusion that lists it as material using only that monster, able to access the classic Dark Paladin and Dark Flare Knight, but also the new targets of Dark Magician Girl the Dragon Knight, a fusion of DMG and a dragon, able to discard to pop a face-up card once per turn in either player's turn, and Amulet Dragon, a fusion of Dark Magician and a dragon that can banish any number of spells from grave on summon to boost its attack by 100 for each, floating into a spellcaster in grave on destruction. These were clearly trying to push a Dark Magician deck, but were far too little to get anything off the ground for that to be meta relevant. However, these were not the imports that had people talking, as there were 6 more imports in this set that would all hold meta relevance over the coming months. The first of these would be Curry Bandit, which in the end phase of the turn its normal summon contribute itself to Excavate 5, add a spell trap from those to hand, and put the rest in the grave, being an insane starter for the theorized Sylvan deck, but also holding power as a heavy mill tool. The next would be Mathematician, who on normal summon could bend any level 4 or lower monster from deck to grave, drawing a card if destroyed by battle, being effectively a better version of Armageddon Knight for various strategies that also drew a card after, like Card Trooper, seeing play for these reasons. Next up was Wiretap, a counter trap that negates a trap and shuffles it back into deck for no cost, cool. Being solid as most counter traps that did something similar required a cost of some kind. The last 3, however, would be...
This set was really cool. Outside of Soul Charge being way too broken, I really like, and I wish they did this more often, is if we had side sets that instead of giving us like useless archetypes that maybe become good in the future, I would like them to have more side sets that just have like a bunch of generic bangers, you know what I mean? Like, just give me more like good staples, good generic cards that can maybe revolutionize a couple of decks rather than just giving me like 3 new archetypes every month and we have to play a guessing game of which ones are good or not, right? Because it's impossible to tell whether a side set archetype is going to be good or not because it completely depends on if they get support in the main sets anyways, right? Well,
the most impactful of all. Fire and Ice Hand were a duo of cards that, on destruction, pop a monster in Fire Hand's case or a spell trap in Ice Hand's, and if you do, floats into a copy of the other. These two would be a powerful control engine of sorts that would be splashed into almost everything over the coming months, representing 6 total pops if they go uncountered. Lastly, Soul Charge was a spell that could, for the cost of 1,000 life points a monster and your battle phase that turn, summon as many monsters as you'd like from the graveyard. Needless to say, Amass Monster Reborn was incredibly powerful, and on top of that, it was available at 3 copies on release, meaning that every deck could have access to a mass board revival for the cost of simple life points, which at this stage were becoming more and more of an expendable resource. YCS Paris would be held the same weekend, though a major point of note here needs to be that due to a logistical issue, Dragons of Legend would not be legal.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I played YCS Paris. I topped YCS Paris, but I didn't remember. I don't think we had those cards. Yeah, though they were not here. They were not legal. For YCS Paris, I have another funny story. There was another. Obviously, I played Mermail. And there was a card that I only heard of on the Friday. That people were hyping up for Mermail decks, and I really wanted to play it. And the card is called Aqua Mirror Cycle. It's technically, I think it's an Ice Barrier card, technically. It's target a water you control and 2 waters in the graveyard. Shuffle the first target into the deck, and if you do, add the second target to your hand, right? Gishki, never mind, not Ice Barrier, Gishki, obviously. Yeah, my bad. And it was at the point, it gets a reprint in 2015, but at the time of the YCS, it was only in Galactic Overlord as a common card. And no one in the entire freaking venue of YCS Paris had that card. So I had to go and buy Galactic Overlord packs until I will pull the freaking common card to put into my Mermail deck for YCS Paris, right? And I bought how many packs do you think I had to buy until I pulled the common? How many packs was it, you think? It's very funny because I was not the only one looking for the card. A friend of mine was also looking for it, and so we went there together. Right? We went there together, and the absolute giga chat that I am, pulled that shit out the first pack. First pack, I pull it. Easy clap. And I only wanted 1 copy anyways, right? My friend has to buy I think it was an entire box almost. I don't think it was an entire box complete. It was not 24, but it was like 20. And they spent a solid, like, I think it was like $80, and I was sitting there. I pulled it in the first pack. They were mad. They were mad. But yeah, it's very funny.
For the main event of this particular YCS. Peter Gross would take the event on Mermail, being his 3rd YCS win after his 2 wins in 2012.
Yeah,
the new cards...
There it is. He played it too. The double Aqua Mirror Cycle in his deck.
Due to a logistical issue, Dragons of Legend would not be legal for the main event of this particular YCS. Peter Gross would take...
Yeah, there it is. No, Peter was insane back in the day. One of my greatest motivators as well, as to like eventually... I always told him I want to catch up to you one day, and he kept winning more YCSs, but yeah.
Event on Mermail, being his 3rd YCS win.
I did catch up eventually, but it's because he stopped playing, I suppose.
After his 2 wins in 2012. The new cards of Dragons of Legend would have to wait just a bit longer to rock the meta, but they would have to share the stage with the next core set released 3 weeks later. Primal Origin. Release date, May 17th, 2014. Set type, core set. Major strategies, Artifact, Sylvan, Fusion. Impact, ending the Zexal era with
Why was there an Allure in a water deck? Because it was very easy to resolve it. Allure was one of the best cards in Mermail because it was centered around Gen X Undyne. And so you would always have that dead controller in your hand. It was really, really nice to have Allure. Allure was essentially Pot of Greed in Mermail.
Primal Origin would be the final core set of the Zexal era, and if it wanted to end the era with a bang, it absolutely accomplished that in spades, introducing a new meta archetype in addition to providing support waves to multiple other archetypes both in the meta and just outside of it, completely shaking things up prior to the WCQ circuit taking place over the next few months. The new archetype here was Artifact, a series of monsters that could be set in the spell trap zone, summoning themselves if popped on the opponent's turn while set there, including Moral Talk, who pops a face-up opponent's card when summoned on the opponent's turn, Beagle Talk, who pops up to 2 of your set cards if summoned on the opponent's turn, Scythe, a TCG exclusive that locks an opponent's extra deck summons if summoned on the opponent's
turn. A TCG exclusive too? God damn.
Turn. Durendal, a rank 5 that can detach a material to change an opponent's activated monster or normal spell trap effect to destroy a spell trap the opponent controls, and can detach one to mulligan both players' hands in either turn, with both effects being tied to the same once per turn restriction. Ignition, a quick play spell that pops a spell trap on the field, then sets an artifact monster from deck to the spell trap zone, able to skip the opponent's next battle phase and
Besides Scythe, the artifact archetype is actually really cool and well designed, I think. Like, it was a really it had the exact right balance, I feel like, between they weren't super broken, but they were absolutely competitively viable, and they had a very unique playstyle. Like, it was really cool, I think. I liked artifacts a lot at the time. And besides what cards like Lancia and Scythe would do eventually, like, these cards were super cool at the time.
While set, and Sanctum, a trap that summons an artifact from deck,
even Sanctum,
triggering
like,
their summon
Sanctum was
effect
really good, but it wasn't like outrageous.
To the opponent's turn, and pops a card on field if destroyed while set. Artifacts were a solid engine of removal pieces, specifically in the case of Moral Talk with Sanctum, being considered as a splash engine for various decks in the meta to buff up their removal options. Sylvan would receive a solid second wave of support here in Cherub Sprout, able to excavate up to 2 on special summon, and able to special summon a level 1 plant from deck if excavated. Sage Koya, able to be special summoned from hand if a Sylvan is sent to grave except in the damage step, can excavate 1 once per turn, and can recur a Sylvan spell trap if excavated. Princess Sprout, a TCG exclusive that can tribute herself to excavate 1, send it to grave regardless of the results, and place a Sprout monster in grave on top of the deck, and if excavated, special summons herself with any level between 1 and 8. Aurea, a rank 7 that can send a plant from hand or field to grave to reorder cards on top of the deck equal to the level of the sent monster, and can detach 1 to excavate up to 3 cards, send any plants to grave, and bounce that many cards on field to hand. And Charity, a spell that lets you draw 3 then stack 2, including a Sylvan, from hand on top of the deck.
Charity is a crazy card for the deck, because you also get to decide what's on top of your deck. Like, that card's insane.
Stacking every card in hand if you don't have a Sylvan. This wave would iron out a ton of the issues that Sylvan had from its initial debut, with Sage and Princess specifically filling a major void in the excavation access and Charity reading almost like a custom card for the archetype. But whether or not it would perform would have to be seen in the YCS and WCQ circuit. Bujin would receive a couple of new cards here in Harume, a Beast Warrior Bujin that must be special summoned by banishing a Bujin from grave except
Sylvan
itself,
was good.
And rips a card from
it was viable. Let's say it like that. Let's not argue too much about it. I didn't personally like it that much, but it was definitely a meta deck. Whether it was the best deck or tier 1 or tier 2, let's not argue about it. I think it wasn't that great, but people did play it and people did have success with it, so it's all right.
Both players' hand on destruction, Sinew, a TCG exclusive that can banish itself from grave to boost the Bujin by the attack of a battling monster, having battle damage from that battle, and Amaterasu, a 3-material rank 4 that can detach 1 to either summon a banish level 4 lower on your turn, or add a banish level 4 lower to
This is one of the examples where this card was never really good in Bujin, because it required 3 monsters, and Bujin really never had that. At least very rarely. But this was really cool in, like, other combo decks a couple years down the line. Like, I played this in like rank 4 Minerva Turbo, and it was really cool.
Opponent's turn. The support would be solid for Bujin all around, giving the deck an in-archetype honest of sorts as well as more rank 4 swarming options, seeing a boost in the deck's play rate from this support. Moving into the standalones, Traptrix would receive Dionea, with the standard Traptrix immunity, special summons a Traptrix from grave on normal, and sets a whole normal trap from grave on special, being an incredibly powerful piece to pair with a previously released Murmelio for a splash engine. Madolche would receive Angeli, with the standard Madolche reshuffle effect and contribute herself to summon a Madolche from deck, shuffling it back into the deck at the end phase of your next turn, which was an incredible starter for Madolche by giving the deck immediate access to Hootcake, who already had a monster engraved to banish thanks to Angeli's tribute not triggering the shuffle back effect. Majesty's Fiend was a counterpart to the previously released Vanity's Fiend, locking monster effects while on the field, being a solid counter strategy to various decks in many different metagames. Number 103 Ragnazero was a new rank 4 option, able to detach to pop a monster who has a different attack than its original, drawing a card if you do, being a solid tech choice for countering out some decks. Number 80 Rhapsody and Berserk was another rank 4 option, able to detach one to banish a card in the opponent's grave, and can equip itself onto another XP to boost that monster by 1200 attack, being considered as another tech choice for the banish.
For some reason, I have really good memory of what's in like the really old sets, right? Like, you say like Phantom Darkness, I can tell you what's in that. If you say Light of Destruction, I know what's in there, all that kind of stuff. these sets, even though I played Yu-Gi-Oh super actively at the time, I don't know exactly where all these cards are from somehow. I don't know why this is. Maybe my memory was a lot better when I was even younger. But for some reason, I just don't remember exactly where all these cards came out. I don't know what the reason for that is. I'd be interested in knowing it. Maybe it's because I opened more packs as a kid. Maybe it's that. Maybe I was more hyped for new sets as a kid. I don't know. It's not dementia. I can tell you that, chat. It's not that. You started buying singles? I mean, I guess, but even then, it was more like, I mean, nowadays I do that too, but I still know mostly where the cards are from. I mean, I have a lot more like exposure to it because we always like review stuff on stream and like we like all that kind of stuff. So I guess nowadays it makes sense that I know, but yeah.
Effect primarily. Karen Gorgon was yet another new rank 4 option, able to detach one to change any card's singular target to itself if able, being primarily played as one of the strongest rank 4 bodies on 2450 that still had a decent effect attached. Exceed's Universe is a trap that sends 2 Exceeds to grave to summon a non-number Exceed with a rank that is equal to the combined ranks of the sent Exceeds or one less, attaching itself as material to that monster, being mostly niche in its applications, but did give rank 4 focus decks the ability to access the rank 7 and 8 pool in a roundabout way. Evo Singularity was a new trap for the Evol archetype, able to summon an Evil Czar from the extra deck and attach an Evo Tile and Evil Czar from grave to it as material, being a powerful cheat out option for the floundering strategy. Lastly, and the ban played on, was a continuous trap that locks summoning of monsters with the same level or rank as monsters you already controlled, being a solid floodgate option against various Exceed strategies. YCS Philadelphia would be the same weekend, being another top 16 sealed event, and though Yugioh would continue to dominate the space.
So this is the beginning. This is the beginning of what people refer to as hat format, right? And the reason why people look back at it very fondly is because of exactly what you're seeing on the screen right now. It's a super, super diverse format. And that's why people like it or liked it at the time as well. I personally never liked this format, not because it's super diverse actually. I don't really care, or I didn't care about that at the time. It was just my problem with this format is that a lot of these decks here have super rock, paper, scissor matchups against each other, right? Like, for example, the Hat deck cannot really beat Yugioh, but Yugioh itself, honestly, it was not that good of a deck. It was super like easy to pilot, just set a bunch of traps, open Yugioh armor and Yugioh gear. If not, then you're in trouble. Like, I didn't like Yugioh. It was boring. Hat was kind of boring. Super slow matchup as well, right? Your opponent sets a Yugioh armor. Hat can't deal with it. Trap tricks, artifact trap trick. I don't know. So Bujin is super resident sleeper. Evil Swarm is resident sleeper. So like for the most part, it's not that there is a lot of different decks. It's just that out of all these different decks, I didn't really like anything. There was no deck in here where I really felt like it was good. And Mermail didn't feel that great to me at the time because, you know, it was just like, I don't know, like no one really played it. So I just assumed it was dead kind of until Euros when we brought it back out and it won Euros. But like it's at the time, German Nationals is around this time, I think. And I played Hat. And it was just, I didn't enjoy myself that much.
A very clear change was present from the top 32. The engines present in the past couple of packs would pop up in various strategies throughout the top 32, but most notably would be mixed with each other to form their own standalone decks, like Trap Tricks Hands, Artifact Trap Tricks, and what would become the face of the format in retrospect, Hat, short for Hand Artifact Trap Tricks, which would mix the titular engines together to form a type.
It's just giga boring, isn't it? It's just like this deck plays like a GOAT format deck.
Control package, with the hands providing their monster and spell trap pops in combination with board swarming, the artifacts providing disruption and rank 5 access through more.
No, I love it, and that's okay. That's all right. I don't. It's definitely a format where I can see why people liked it. It just wasn't for me personally. It's completely fine if you enjoyed it. Nothing wrong with that.
And Trap Tricks providing access to Bottomless and Trap Tricks Trap Hole Nightmare.
You're saying GOAT is boring? I think GOAT gets stale after a while. Yeah. I think GOAT is fun if you haven't played it in a long time and you go back to it for a couple games. I don't think GOAT format is as good as people made it out to be for a long time. Like, people celebrated GOAT like crazy for a while, and I felt like it got stale. I was also very hyped on GOAT for a while, and then I just realized, hey, a lot of games are actually the same. They just take very long. Yeah.
Spell trap removal and rank 4 access. This deck would become the face of this period of Yu-Gi-Oh's history, known as Hat format, which would be considered one of the few times in post-5D's Yu-Gi-Oh! Where a deck that is very much a control strategy would be the dominant force on the metagame. Chris LeBlanc would win the event following the top 16 draft, using Madolche to reach top 16, sporting not only the new Angeli line, but also Fire and Ice Hand to help clean up board states, marking the player's second YCS victory following Providence in 2012. This would lead into the next structure deck over a month later, and with most players using the results from the YCS to prepare for the upcoming WCQ circuit, this structure deck would be the last opportunity to provide any kind of shakeup to the already shattered apart metagame.
Oh, the Lightsworn structure, that's cool.
Realm of Light. Release date, June 27th, 2014. Set type, structure deck. Major strategies, Lightsworn. Impact, a revitalization to millers. Realm of Light would be the second of 3 structure decks aimed at providing new support to previously meta archetypes, this time being Lightsworn, who will receive 3 new monsters to bolster their ranks, being Raiden, a tuner that's able to mill 2 to boost himself by 200 for each Lightsworn milled this way, milling 2 more in the end phase, Minerva, a tuner who searches a light dragon on normal whose level is less than or equal to your Lightsworn names in grave, milling 2 in the end phase, and mills 1 when sent from hand or deck to grave. And Michael, a level 7 light lock synchro that can pay 1,000 to banish a card on field, shuffles back any number of Lightsworns in grave on destruction, gaining 300 life points for each, and mills 3 in the end phase. These 3 would each see their own usage both within Lightsworn strategies and in general, with Raiden specifically seeing the most usage due to being a miller that is also a tuner.
I mean, Raiden is just like a solid card, unironically. Like, even in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, there's like a chance that you could play Raiden at some point again. Like, being a warrior, a tuner, a target for Charge of the Light Brigade. Like, if you ever have a deck that has insane value with cards in the graveyard, being able to just like charge, mill 3, search Raiden, summon it, mill 2 more, it's just mill 5. You know, like, there's decks that could use that. I could see it.
Extremely useful for various strategies. Reprints here included JD, Celestia, Jane, Lila, Gareth, Wolf, Aaron, Lumina, Arcus, Raiko, Honest, Blackwing Zephyros, Necrogardna, Solar Recharge, Charge, Foolish, and Breakthrough Skill. The WCQ circuit for the year would begin with the European WCQ on June 29th, and for the most part we'd see similar results to Philadelphia, with Yugioh remaining the top deck and Hat remaining in the top 3. There were a couple of other decks, however, in the top cut worth talking about. Sylvan would see its first set of premier event tops, seeing 3 total, with Sage Goya ironing out many of the archetype's boss monster issues and Sylvan Charge being one of the best enablers the deck could have asked for, utilizing all of the archetype's power cards in addition to plant staples like Lone Fire Blossom and Rose Archer, as well as the mass excavation and dump tool that was Curry Bandit, fitting extremely nicely into the archetype. The other breakout success here would be Lightsworn Ruler, tying Hat for representation and utilizing the newly released Lightsworn structure deck with Raiden
really
and Minerva
cool too. It was
similarly utilizing Curry Bandit for the massive mills he provided.
Here.
Eugen Height would take the event on Mermail, showing the deck can still
This guy wanted to play Frog Monarch until the Friday of this tournament. Until I told him, dude, you cannot play Frog Monarch at this tournament. Please take my Mermail list and play it. Please play it. Don't play freaking Frog Monarchs. And he did. And here we are. God damn it, man.
Perform in the metagame despite the heavily shifting
freaking
landscape
Frog
around
Monarchs.
The South American WCQ would be the same weekend, and Hat would see a far more pronounced performance here, taking a fourth of the representation at 8 slots from the top 32. Roger Moran would take the event on Machina Gadget, being a surprising run for the deck to take, notably playing the singular copy that was allowed of Radox, providing Grave Revival and rank 7 access. Extremely notably here, looking at the top decks, Hat variants took 11 total top spots, with 17 decks across the 32 running the hand package in some shape or form, showing the engine's dominance and staying power. The Oceania and WCQ would be the next weekend, but unfortunately due to poor coverage we only know the top 4 here, where Yugioh would clear into 3 of the 4 spots, with Donald Thompson defeating all of them to take the event with Fire Fist Artifact Hand, trading out the Traptrix engine of most Hat builds for a Fire.
I mean, yeah, this is basically just Hat, but we play another normal summon, which is Bear. Can Bear pop face down monsters? I forgore. Can Bear... Yes? That's pretty good against Yugioh then. That's pretty good. I'm surprised not more people were doing that then. That seems like a pretty good answer to Yugioh. You have that. Dude, don't call it fat. Fire Fist, I guess it's Fire Fist Artifact Trap Tricks. I guess it is fat. Unfortunate.
This package. The Central America WCQ would be the same weekend, and Dolce would have a surprising showing here, taking 5 top spots and landing in second for representation. More notably were the Hat Cores, which managed to weave their way into the top cut seamlessly here, with hands appearing in 9 lists, Trap Tricks in 7, and Artifacts in 5. Jose Lagunes would take the event on Mermail, being another surprising victory for the deck to grab. Lastly would be the North American WCQ.
Looking back, honestly, looking back at this particular format, the success of Mermail is not surprising at all. As well as the upcoming support of Infernity as well. It's just a literal matter of Infernity and Mermail are the 2 best decks to use Soul Charge in. Because what you would do with both of these decks is you would have something that was decently explosive, but they would win the deck. They would win the game every single time they had Soul Charge. And that card was at 3. We were playing between 2 and 3 copies because sometimes it wasn't great in the opener. But like, whenever you could resolve that card in those decks, you would win the game, right? Sylvan too. Nah, Sylvan just sucked ass in comparison to those two. Like, unironically, Sylvan is not great. And then, yeah, it's not that surprising. All the other, everyone was basically control pilled during this format. Everyone was like, yeah, Hat is the shit, Yugioh is the shit, set so many trap cards, and so on and so forth. It wasn't real. It wasn't real. Everyone was control pilled. It was not that. It was not that. You just played a little bit of setup game with Mermail or Infernity, you Soul Charge on them, you win the game every time.
And unfortunately, most of the coverage of this particular event has been lost to time, though we do know some of the goings on through attendee testament. Though the deck was solid, most pro players in the North American circuit were actively lying about the strength of Sylvan as a combo deck in the meta, saving their list for this specific event, and it would perform well.
It was 2 layers of lying at the time. So I think this was something where a lot of pro players were hiding the Sylvan goo, right? Because they wanted to bring it out at the NAWCQ, right? And then they lied a second time because then they said it was good. And I firmly believe that the only reason that this deck was good is because so many American pro players were pilled on it and they played it. Had they played other decks, they probably would have done better. And it only had representation in Top Cut because so many pro players played it. Like, it wasn't actually that good.
One of the most represented decks that we know of from this particular event, with some innovations to the strategy, including Blaster being used as a...
This deck, unironically, if this doesn't open Curry Bandit or Lone Fire Blossom, have fun playing the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because you won't. You're not taking part. Your opponent's playing. You're not.
Rank 7 enabler with Sage Koya, Miracle Fertilizer putting in insane work due to the ruling that its destruction effect will not trigger if a monster that it revives is used as Exceed material, and Spore being used not only as a tuner, but as Exceed material for rank 8s by banishing a Sage Koya for its summon. Corey McDuffie would take the event on Hat, being the first premier event win for the rapidly rising streak.
And guess what? None of them, I don't think anyone qualified for Worlds with Sylvan. None of them.
Strategy, notably playing Pot of Dichotomy thanks to its various types the deck utilized. The day after the NAWCQ, the ban list would be updated, notably being the first time a non-emergency ban list would take effect on a date that wasn't the first of the month, being July 14th, though clearly the list was delayed as to not interfere with the WCQ events already scheduled. Newly limited were Yugioh Gear, the primary combo piece of the Yugioh strategy, and Goyo Guardian, being released from his ban status. Newly semi-limited were Formula Synchron, Magician of Faith, and Rhoda, all coming back from 1. Lastly, newly unlimited were Dimensional Prison and Mirror Force, sparking a bit of debate around these two specifically due to their natures as powerful battle traps, especially Mirror Force. But in retrospect, that call was correct, as their time was coming to an end. We were standing on the precipice of a new era, and though it wouldn't officially start for another month, the year's starter deck would give us a hint as to what was in store.
Supply Squad.
Space Time Showdown. Release date, July 11th, 2014. Set type, starter deck. Major strategies, summoners, magicians, empowered warriors. Impact.
What the hell is that?
Space Time Showdown would be the year's starter deck, and as such would also be our first look at the new mechanic for the Arc 5 era, Pendulums. These monster spell hybrids can either be summoned as normal or set in one of the newly coined pendulum scales, a new zone placed on each side of the board, with a unique effect for where it was placed. When destroyed, pendulums go to the extra deck face up rather than the graveyard, and most importantly, once per turn, if you
Pendulum, I don't even remember how we received Pendulum. It was so weird at the time. I still remember very vividly to this point in time. I remember friggin' thinking that you needed to put the low scale on the left and the high scale on the right, otherwise you wouldn't be able to pendulum summon, because that made sense in my head. I was like, the low scale has to go on the left, the high scale has to go on the right, otherwise it doesn't make sense. Because why else would they put it on the left and the right side of the card? Right? Like, why is it on both sides? Because I thought that the blue one is the one that it has on the left and the red one is the one it has on the right. And so to this day, if you put your high scale to the left and your low scale to the right, in my eyes, you're a criminal. You're a criminal. That's all. That's all. It should be that way.
And Time Gazer magicians have a scale of 1 and 8 respectively. That would mean that while they're in scale, you can pendulum summon out any monsters between the levels of 2 and 7, and upon finding this out, the community lost their collective minds. The idea of being able to summon out massive bosses for effectively free signaled the end of Yu-Gi-Oh, as many called it. However, this was completely overblown. There was experimentation initially with cards like Jinzo and Miss Valley Apex Avian being cheated out, but the reality of the situation was that because of the lack of pendulum monsters, the mechanic was nowhere near as busted as people would think initially. Aside from these two, the only new release here worth noting was Supply Squad, a continuous spell that lets you draw a card once per turn when a monster—
People were so hyped on Supply Squad. But the truth about Pendulum is that, like, unlike Xyz or Synchros or now Lynx, it's another fundamentally flawed mechanic. Because it requires you, like, it's funny because all of the mechanics that require you to put cards into your main deck historically have all been flawed. Whether it's Ritual, Fusion, or Pendulum, all of these mechanics are super flawed because you have to basically... The only times that these mechanics are actually good is when they make cards that cheat the system, basically. When they make fusion spells that generate more card advantage than they should, or when you confuse from others, like when you confuse from the deck or banish from the graveyard or whatever. Like, you never fuse the way you're supposed to fuse. You never ritual the way you're supposed to ritual. You're never... And you also never, if you really think about it, you never really pendulum summon the way you were supposed to pendulum summon. You would never just, or I mean, sometimes you would, but like you wouldn't actually go and place one card on the left and place one card on the right and then pendulum summon from hand. You wouldn't do that. You would have to like basically make your entire deck revolve around pendulum cards, and then you would still need cards that would cheat the system by being one card scales, for example, like freaking Monkey Board or whatever, right? Klee did that. What the hell are you talking about? First of all, your name is Runic Circular, and Klee did not freaking do that. The first thing that Klee played every time was a scale that searched another card. Every time. The hell are you yapping about? You think Klee is a traditional pendulum deck? Holy. Metal Foes didn't do that either. Metal Foes cheated the system by creating free cards in the extra deck. You wouldn't scale 2 Metal Foes and then pendulum summon. You don't do that. You go scale, pop your scale, set one, put another one in the scale, pop the other one, set another card like that. It's not, you don't actually, you know, like...
destroyed.
There's always these mechanics are all just flawed because if you do it the way they want you to do it, they all suck. Because guess what? Having 5 cards in your hand, if 2 of them are dedicated scales to sit in your scale and not do anything else, you play with 3 cards in your hand, which is terrible. Even if you get a special summon from it, it's just not great. It was never a good mechanic. It was only good because they made obscenely broken cards for it.
Lastly, with the release of this starter deck, there were a couple of adjustments to the master rules alongside the pendulum changes. The first of these was there could now be an active field spell on each side of the field, meaning that you and your opponent no longer had to fight for field spell priority, though up until this point that rarely happened.
For pendulum, they specifically had to even change the rules to even make it viable.
Was that the player going first no longer drew for the start of their first turn. This was an incredibly important change, as now there was a real sacrifice for choosing to go first over going second, and though most players would still choose to set up first over the extra card moving forward, it did introduce an an interesting dynamic into the decision process. Following this year's starter deck, Battle Pack 3 Monster League would release on August 1st.
I think the new field spell ruling at the time, I never really minded it. And I don't think it's a terrible decision that they changed it. I still think it'd be kind of better if they didn't do that. You know, looking back at it, it's not something I'm super mad about that they changed it, but I think it'd be cooler if we could counter field spells. I also think, like, from a logical standpoint, I don't know, it doesn't really make sense, does it? Like, if you really think about it, you know, like, field spells apply to the entire field. Like, let me you know, like, I don't know. Runic would be in shambles. It would be. A lot of modern card design wouldn't work because they designed them with that in mind. But I think it would be it'd make more sense. I don't think I like that they changed that.
What draft pack would be used for YCS?
It wouldn't, like, solve all the problems of modern Yu-Gi-Oh! That's not what it would do, but, like, it's not that bad. All monsters would be considered all types, being exceptionally interesting as a sealed draft product for that reason, in addition to reprints of Levier the Sea Dragon, Daigusto Emerald, Gakaka Cowboy, Diamond Direwolf, and Ghost Trick Alucard. The World Championship would be a week later from August 9th to the 10th, and this would be one of the most interesting years in terms of coordination for Worlds, as it would be the first time that both ban lists had to be taken into account. In previous years, what the ban list would encompass was never really up for discussion since both regions followed the same list. This was a really interesting one because I helped Eugen prepare for this a little bit, and I think it was the first tournament actually that he played in, or that we ever had, that had 5-card opening hands and not drawing on your first turn. I'm pretty sure that is what changed, right? Why am I mixing that up right now? That was that master rule, right? Did they just say that? That is what they changed. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I thought yeah. So that was, like, a massively weird thing to prepare for a tournament where you basically had no idea what people would make of it, essentially, right? The only thing that we did, I think the mistake that we made during that preparation is we didn't have Infernity on our radars. We tried all of the decks, but we didn't try Infernity enough, or maybe even not even at all. So yeah, that was an oversight.
However, since the TCG-OCG split, Worlds would need to have a ban list that effectively combined the harshest hits from both regions, leaving some decks in a much weaker or stronger state than initially expected, especially with the removal of exclusives from both pools. Because of this, and despite having multiple hits on the ban list, Infernity would move to be the most successful deck at the event, taking 3 of the top 8 as well as the World Champion title piloted by Sahabi Carradine of Canada, marking himself as the 2014 World Champion. This would be the final event of the Zexal era, fittingly enough, and as we moved into the next era of the game, the core set kickoff would do more than just reset the previous meta. It was going to obliterate it into the stratosphere.
Oh,
Duelist
yes.
Alliance. Release date, August 15th, 2014. Set type, core set. Major strategies, Satellar Knight, Shadal, Burning Abyss. Impact, the beginning of modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist Alliance is considered by most in the community to be the exact moment when the older version of Yu-Gi-Oh! Officially pivoted to the modern era, being one of the strongest set releases of all time. But why is that? We've had era kickoffs that heavily impacted the meta before, like in the case of Duelist Genesis, and this one wasn't even that strong of a start for the pendulum mechanic at all, so why is this the pivot point? Well, it's not about the mechanics here, it's about card and deck design. Up until this point, most formats have a significant amount of back and forth, specifically in the viability of trap cards, especially summon responders and battle traps, and that was because at the time, decks operated at a speed that was forgiving enough to allow for those kind of disruptions, especially in the meta recently here with hat format being effectively a control-centered metagame. With the release of Duelist Alliance, it wouldn't change immediately, but it would be felt over the coming months as the game slowly transitioned away from back row heavy games and focused a lot more heavily on the strategies and archetypes' own inner strengths to build boards with, and fast. This set would introduce a new monster type in Worms, and 5 new archetypes into the meta, ranging from rogue picks to the absolute top tier. So let's start with the core 3, with each being based on one of the previous summoning mechanics, aimed at taking that mechanic higher than before. The first of these was Satellar Knight, the Exceed archetype of the bunch, aimed at using their light warriors to quickly swarm the board, gain resources, and enable 3 material ranked
This game
boards.
sucked.
This first wave included Deneb, who searched a Tellar Knight on summon except itself, Altair, able to revive a Tellar Knight on summon, Vega, who summoned a Tellar Knight from hand on summon, Anukalai, who dumped a Tellar Knight from deck on summon, Beltros, a 3-material rank 4 that keeps the opponent from responding to his summon, and can attach to pop a card on field once per turn, floating into a Teller Knight when sent to grave, Skybridge, which swaps the Teller Knight on field for one in deck with a different name, and Stellar Nova Alpha, a counter trap for spell traps that sends a Teller Knight from field to grave as cost, drawing a card on resolution. This deck would be heavily reliant on its back row line, similar to the decks of the Hat era, and as such, though it did see a fair amount of success in the coming months, the moment more options were available in the pool, so Teller Knight would fall out of favor just as quickly as it came in. The second archetype was Shadal, focused on fusions, which not only had all of their monsters include effects when sent to grave, but also flip effects on all of their main deck pieces, being a pseudo-revival of the flip mechanic that we haven't seen in quite some time. This included Falco, who revives a Shadal face down on flip and summons itself face down when sent by effect, Hedgehog, who searches a Shadal spell trap on flip and a monster if sent by effect, Squamata, who destroys a monster on flip or dumps a Shadal from deck if sent by effect, Dragon, who bounces a card on flip or pops a spell trap if sent by effect, Beast, who draws 2 and discards 1 when flipped, or draws 1 if sent by effect.
Shadal's
Winda,
also dope,
a fusion of a
man.
Shadal and a Dark that can't be destroyed by opponent's card effects and locks both players to 1 special summon a turn, recurring a Shadal spell trap to hand when sent to grave. Construct, a fusion of a Shadal and a Light that dumps a Shadal card on summon and destroys any special summon monster at battles, recurring a Shadal spell trap to hand when sent to grave. Sinister Shadow Games, which dumps the Shadal from deck to flip any number of set Shadals.
This is probably my favorite Shadal card, by the way. Sinister Shadow Games was so dope.
Up. Core, able to summon itself as an effect monster with any attribute for a Shadal fusion summon, recurring a Shadal spell trap to hand when sent to grave. And lastly, and most importantly, Shadal Fusion, a fusion spell for Shadals using hand or field, but could also use materials from deck if the opponent controlled any monster summoned from the extra deck. Shadal Fusion specifically would be the catalyst for an absolute overhaul to the fusion mechanic as a whole, with almost every deck that used fusions in a relevant way having a Shadal Fusion-like card for the foreseeable future. Though Shadal was recognizably powerful out the gate thanks to this incredible first wave of support, aside from the usage of Core, they had no way to access Construct in Archetype, causing the deck to be mixed with other popular light attribute engines to offset this, most commonly being the Artifacts and Light Swarms. The third archetype was Yang Zing, the Synchro archetype of the group, being the introduction of the new Worm type as well, with all of their monsters sharing a common effect to float into another Yang Zing name when destroyed, each being a different attribute,
they made these
and all of the
mistiming,
non-tuners both
was
allowing
kind of
quick
a
synchros on the opponent's turn
oversight,
using only Yang Zings, and gave their Synchro monster an additional effect, with Suwani boosting the Synchro by 500, Bien preventing battle destruction, Bixie providing trap immunity, and Pulao providing spell immunity, while Chiwin, the tuner of the bunch, could revive itself when a Yang Zing is destroyed. Their Synchro target, Baxia, was a level 8 Worm-locked Synchro that spun away cards on summon up to the different attributes used to make him, and could pop a card you control to revive a level 4 or lower once per turn, triggering the Yang Zing summon effects. Lastly, for spell traps, Path let you cycle back 3 Yang Zings to deck to draw 2, and Creation let you, if a monster you control is destroyed, summon a Yang Zing from deck once per turn, being effectively an additional Yang Zing float. Yang Zing would have its rounds of experimentation off of this initial wave, but was considerably slower than both Teller and Shadal, leaving it easily as the weakest of the 3 core archetypes. The last 2 archetypes here were actually both TCG exclusive archetypes, with Konami of America aiming to introduce 2 different archetypes here to build out over the course of the next few core sets, rather than sinking all of their time and effort into Noble Knights 2.0. The first of these was UA, a series of warriors based on various sports that can summon themselves from hand by bouncing another UA to hand once per turn. This first wave was Mighty Slugger, who stuns cards and effects while attacking, Perfect Ace, able to discard on the opponent's turn to negate any card or effect once per turn, and Stadium, a field spell that searches a UA monster when you normal summon a UA, and permanently boosts all UAs by 500 the first time a UA is special summoned each turn. UA have the bones to be a decent rogue level deck here with this start, but absolutely needed more support to go anywhere, especially needing a no tribute normal summon specifically to be able to trigger Stadium reliably. The second, and easily more important of the 2, was Burning Abyss, a series of level 3 fiends based on the Divine Comedy, with each main deck monster sharing an effect that they would be automatically destroyed if they share the field with a
So Burning Abyss, you guys often hear me joke about Burning Abyss's viability, right? Because I never actually played the deck at the time, right? I do like quite Abyss. I do like Burning Abyss quite a lot, though. I always thought it was really, really cool. It's just kind of like, I never actually thought it was the best deck. So I never actually played it from a competitive perspective. But I do think the cards are pretty damn dope and also really fun. I just always, like, for example, in this format, I played Shadal. The year after, I always played Necros and all that. I always ended up finding other stuff that I liked more, and I always had, to be fair, a relatively easy time against Burning Abyss as well. Like Shadal would cook Burning Abyss, Necros would cook Burning Abyss, all that kind of stuff, right? And then in 2016, I played that Pendulum deck with Kirin at Euros that also cooked Burning Abyss. So somehow, no matter what I played, it always just had a freaking easy time against Burning Abyss, right? And so the way I remember Burning Abyss is that I don't know, I would just beat it every time. I'd like there's like I think this is a phase where I go years of playing against Burning Abyss at major events, and I don't think I ever lost to it. So yeah.
Non-Burning Abyss monster, and could all be special summoned from hand while you control no spells or traps, with each
It's a
also
cool
having an
deck,
effect
though.
when sent to grave, with Graph summoning a Burning Abyss from deck.
I'm telling
Seer summoning one
Farfa, you
from
don't have to. I already did plenty of times. He knows this.
grave, and Starm, who searched a level 3 Dark Fiend in the end phase of the turn at sent to grave, with these effects sharing a hard once per turn with their summon effects. They would also receive an Exceed monster in Dante, a rank 3 that could detach and mill up to 3 to boost his attack by 500 for each card milled that turn, swapping to defense mode if he attacked, recurring a BA to hand if sent to grave. Lastly, Traveler could summon any number of Burning Abyss monsters sent to grave that turn. While it seems like this was only a small
really
wave,
dope
which it was
design,
being
though.
only 5
Like
cards
the
in total,
artworks
Burning
and all
Abyss
that,
would go
the
from
idea
this wave to
behind
be
it,
an
I think is really
absolutely
cool.
dominant threat in the metagame for the foreseeable future, similarly to Shaddoll, which
They
we'll
don't
see
really
with the
make
next
him
YCS.
like this anymore.
Moving into the one-off pieces, Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon would be the only noteworthy addition to the pendulum mechanic here, able to pop itself in scale during the end phase to search for any pendulum with 1500 or less attack, being also notable as it was the Arc 5 protagonist ace monster, so while low impact now, it was certain to get more support over the next few years, like how Stardust and Utopia had before it. Artifacts would receive Lancia, who was interesting as it didn't have to be on field for its effect as opposed to its kin, able to tribute itself from hand or field as a quick effect to prevent all banishing until the next turn, being considerable as a side deck option. Nefarious Archfiend Eater of Nefariousness is a level 4 that can summon itself from hand if you control a spellcaster, able to pop a monster on your field in the opponent's end phase to summon itself from grave, being considered as an option for Shaddoll specifically as it could be used as both Exceed material and as a way to pop your monsters for their effects. Battery Man 9-Volt, on summon, searches a Battery Man monster and doubles its attack and defense, destroying itself in your next end phase, being such a powerful piece of search capability for the deck in addition to being summonable off of Charger that it would help Battery Man see rogue level play and success in the coming months. Castel the Skyblaster Musketeer was a new rank 4 that could either detach 1 to flip a monster face down, or detach 2 to spin away a face-up card, being an extremely powerful addition to the generic rank 4 pool. Magical Spring let the user draw cards equal to the face-up spell traps the opponent controls, then discard equal to the face-up spell traps you control, being specifically billed as a counter for the Pendulum strategy, which would see side deck play as Pendulums grew more popular. The Monarch Stormforth allowed the user to tribute summon using an opponent's monster that turn.
Oh no, not Monarchs. Oh no, not Monarchs. I'm not ready yet. I thought that was 2015.
A better version of Soul Exchange for many tribute summon focused decks, like Monarch and Battery Man. Time Space Trap Hole could, when the opponent special summons from the hand or extra deck, spin that monster back, dealing 1000 to the user for each, being a considerable tool for decks utilizing the Trap Tricks monsters. Lastly, Fearless Lightsworn Archer was an OCG import that was a tuner and, when sent from deck to grave by card effect, special summoned herself, able to tribute herself to pop a monster and mill 3, being exceptionally powerful for Shaddoll specifically as a material for construct using Fusion's deck material requirement. Without question, Duelist Alliance would completely change the game as we knew it forever, though would have to wait a few weeks for the first true opportunity to prove itself, with another set release occurring between then and now, which itself would be a monumental change for the game as a whole. 2014 Megatins.
Oh, Megatins the first time,
August
yeah.
29th, 2014. Set type, reprint set. Major strategies, every single relevant card from Tachyon to Valiant. Impact, lowering the price of the previous meta. The 2014 Megatins would be a new yearly staple in the game as a whole, bringing reprints for every powerful card from a core set release in the previous year, with this one covering Tachyon, Judgment, Spectres, and Valiant. In addition to these reprints, they also came with 10 promos that also guaranteed certain reprints, being Tiger King, Susanoo, Gorilla, Nightmare Shark, and Crane. As for the relevant reprints in these packs, every mecha pack included one secret, ultra, super, and
Megatins
rare,
are great.
with all
We
of
all
the
know
cards in
that.
this
Like,
collection matching
this
their
is
rarity.
we all know this nowadays because this is 10 years ago. For now, like nowadays, it's normal that they do this every year. Back in the day, this was friggin' like that was insane. I think this was received almost the same way that we received the rarity collection this year, because it's never been done before, and we were just like so happy about it.
From their original sets, bringing easy access reprints of Armades, the Boujens, Coach Soldier Wolfbark, Constellar Omega and Sombre, Divine Dragon Knight Felgrand, Evil Swarm Exciton Knight and Kerkion, the Fire Fists, Geargia Gear, the Ghost Tricks, the Harpies, Hootcake, the Mecha Phantom Beasts, Mistake, the Mythic Dragons, Master Key, Astral Force, Sacred Sword, Silent Honor Arc, Star Eater, the Sylvans, Transmodified,
Okay,
the
now
Trap
we're listing
Trickses,
every card that we've
Wyverburster,
already
and
listed
Collapse
in the video.
Serpent, and Exceeds Encore. In addition to this, the 5Ds Manga Volume 6 would release here, giving us Hot Red Dragon Archfiend, a level 8 synchro that popped all other attack position monsters on the field once per turn, being sort of the opposite of the original RDA, who nuked defense monsters. YCS Madrid would be the first YCS of the era, taking place on September 7th, and almost immediately we'd see the result of the new releases and how they would be putting the previous meta landscape to shame. Shaddoll, Satellar Knight, and Burning Abyss would together take over 3/4 of the top cut representation here, which would actually grow more substantial over the course of the following months.
There's also
Burning
a
Abyss would see
Chainburn.
4 top spots here, with a couple of extremely notable inclusions seeing play here in this build. Thanks to the lack of Burning Abyss names, many other monsters would be played here to help fill the gaps for now, such as Ryza for tributing over a special summon BA, and Mathematician for dumping a BA for setup. One card though that was absolutely not a space filler was Tour Guide, who could summon any Burning Abyss from deck with her effect, negating their destruction condition on the field, able to make a rank 3 to detach the summoned BA and trigger their effect. Most commonly hitting Skarm this way, as Skarm's end phase search could also grab Tour Guide. Another interesting tech piece here was Rank Up Magic Astral Force, able to turn a spent Dante into Constellar Pallades, able to add itself to hand for your draw if you milled it using Dante. Satellar Knight would take the second largest slice, feeling very similar to the control decks of the previous format thanks to the heavy amounts of back row that the deck relied heavily on to make up for its limitations. As standardly, you could make a 3 material rank 4 easily, but beyond that relied heavily on resource management between copies of Altair and Deneb to carry the grind game, with Stellar Nova Alpha specifically being one of the most key pieces of their back row lineups. Shaddoll would take half of the top 32 representation, as well as first place piloted by Joshua Schmidt, utilizing 3 Moral Talk and 1 Fearless to cover the light requirements for Construct sub.
Oh, I love this deck, man. The double cyclone, dude. The double cyclone. The thing is, at the time, I didn't feel that great about this tournament, because of what happened in top 4, right? Where I summoned the wrong fusion with Super Poly. And so I always felt bad about that, because I mean it was not on purpose. It was 100% an accident, but I felt really bad about it, and I beat myself up about it like for so long, thinking like, oh, my first YCS win doesn't really count or whatever, you know, like I didn't deserve to win, and it felt really bad at the time, even though I had been working towards. Like, I had been working towards winning a tournament for so long, right? I'd been waiting for it for so long, and then for it to be like overshadowed by that, it was not easy for me. Even though I always knew it was an accident, right? And like I didn't do it on purpose and all that. It didn't help that people were really mad about it too. Like the Italians. Which I mean, understandably, I guess, but like, I don't know. It's nowadays I can look back at it and I can say, yeah, I worked really hard for it, and I did. I do think I deserved to win a YCS at the time, so it is what it is. I can live with it. I know that it wasn't, you know, that I didn't do it knowingly, right? It was just a mistake. But yeah, what happened? So my opponent had it was top 4. It wasn't even the finals, but it was top 4, and my opponent had a Shaddoll Construct and a Black Dragon Collar Serpent, and I top decked Super Poly, and I didn't realize that. Well, I fused the Construct and the Black Dragon Collar Serpent, and in my mind, it was like, okay, there's a Shaddoll, which is the Shaddoll monster, and there's also a light. So I summoned Construct, right? I summoned Construct, and attacked for game later in the turn. But obviously, it was a Shaddoll in a dark and not a Shaddoll in a light. So yeah, I messed it up. It was a mistake. I summoned the wrong fusion. I do think, for what it's worth, I do think I would still have won that top 4 match if I had summoned the correct fusion, which was Winda. But at the time, it felt really bad for me. It felt really bad to me. My opponent was really mad about it too after they found out, right? Because during the time, it was a feature match, right? It was a feature match. My opponent didn't realize it. The judges didn't realize it. No one realized it. And then we finished all that, you know, and then before the finals happened, my opponent came back and was like really mad about it, and I was like, you know, I was kind of in shock as well. And then they they did a whole thing. They did like the Konami did like an investigation as well on it before we even got to play the finals. They checked like the footage to try and find out if they thought it was intentional or not or whatever, and they reached the conclusion that it wasn't intentional. So I was allowed to play the finals. All that kind of stuff. It felt really bad for me, having worked like I feel like worked my ass off for months or years to get to the position to finally win a YCS, and then for it to have happened in that fashion was like freaking yeah, it was bad. I didn't for a long time, for years, I never felt like it was a deserved win. When looking back, nowadays I can think a little differently on it, but yeah, it was rough.
As well as providing access to BLS on a whim. Also very notable here was a card in the side deck that would become a major trouble point for many players in the meta, being Super Polymerization. The card up until now had seen very little play due to never having a deck it could really take advantage of, with the closest being some builds of Hero Beat in the 5Ds and Zexal eras. Here though, with so much more of the meta pivoting towards lights and darks, Super Poly would become an end-all monster removal piece thanks to being completely unrespondable, which gave Shaddoll a significant advantage moving deeper into the format. The other side here is how Shaddoll Fusion was effectively a boss monster and 2 Foolish Burials at any point the opponent left an extra deck monster on the field, which would continue growing in power as the format went on. With these decks, we would also see the rise in one particular trap card. Vanity's Emptiness was now seeing play in literally every deck of the format, usually at 2 to 3 copies in the main, entirely thanks to the new threats.
On a more positive note, Double Cyclone here in the main deck might look weird to some of you guys, because it's like technically a worse MST, which I'm citing, right? So the reason why I was playing Double Cyclone in this deck was it had multiple reasons, but basically I was really worried about drawing dead moral tax, right? I didn't like that part about my deck, is that, like, I mean, the artifact engine I think was really strong, but drawing dead moral tax was quite annoying, right? And so I wanted another card that would enable my moral tack, right? And Double Cyclone would be able to do that. And the thing about Double Cyclone, the reason why it wasn't actually worse than MST, which is something that's hard to believe, but I mean, Double Cyclone was not worse than MST at the time, because the main reason the main use for MST was Vanity's Emptiness, right? You wouldn't really MST face down back rows very often, because, I mean, there's Sanctum, there's Moral Tack, there's Shadow Games, all that kind of stuff. You wouldn't blind MST very often. So the way you would simply do it is you would just activate your Shaddoll Fusion, or whichever card you want to activate. Mainly it was Shaddoll Fusion, right? Activate Shaddoll Fusion. If your opponent has Emptiness, you can just go Double Cyclone, your Shaddoll Fusion, and the Emptiness, and it's the same thing as if you had MST. It doesn't matter that it destroys your own card, because you can just pop your face-up Shaddoll Fusion, right? And then on another note, it's outing your own emptiness is not an argument, because some people said that in chat right now. Outing your MST would out your own emptiness the same way, right? You can just MST. You can even MST your opponent's card, and if that goes into the graveyard, then your emptiness dies. Like, that's not an argument. You can do the same with MST. But the scenario specifically, so Double Cyclone was basically the same as MST almost all the time, unless you drew Moral Tack. Because if you drew MST with Moral Tack, you had to MST your own Moral Tack to make it live. Whereas if you had Double Cyclone, you could Double Cyclone your Moral Tack and their back row. So in that sense, it was better. How are you using Shaddoll Fusion? Is Emptiness is stopping special summons? No, your opponent would have a set Emptiness. You activate Shaddoll Fusion and they chain Emptiness, right? That's how it would go.
The meta, taking extreme advantage of board flooding special summons, and this issue was only going to get worse. Joshua would also be the first recipient of the new season's YCS prize card, Ascension Sky Dragon, which, while possible to summon, was not nearly as useful as the previous season's Giant Hand. Unfortunately, YCS Toronto would be held the same weekend, being another top 16 sealed event, being the first one played with the new Battle Pack 3, but arguably just as notably, the entire top 32 would be filled out by the new Duelist Alliance decks, with Shaddoll once again taking the lion's share. Patrick Hoban would take the event after the draft cut, piloting Shaddoll to the top 16, notably playing 3 Super Poly in the main to handle all of the Duelist Alliance matchups. Something else that would become very much a trend in the community following this specific top would be the inclusion of Upstart Goblin at 3 copies in many 40-card decks. While the trend had come and gone a few times before in the past, this card would see a massive spike in popularity following Hoban's usage, with the term Upstart Hoban being a common occurrence with a theory of playing 3 Upstart.
I mean, it's funny that you bring this up now, because this has been a case. This has been a thing for the entire year already. Maybe even 2013 already. Like you showed a lot of decks with 3 upstarts, which was mostly Hoban's fault.
40 card deck, you're effectively playing a 37 card deck. YCS Lima would be the following week, but unfortunately we have no information at all about this particular event other than knowing the winner was Germain Pina, who we don't even know the deck of. Over the next few weeks, a few changes would hit the game one after the other, the first being the release of the game Zexal World Duel Carnival, which brought its promo cards Night Express Night and Special Schedule, cards meant to help enable a level and rank 10 strategy, specifically around Gustav Max at the time, but for the time being would be irrelevant. Following this would be another ban list update, taking effect on October 1st, and would be aimed at solving a few of the early issues with the format as well as balancing out some of the previously hit cards. Newly limited were Infernity Archfiend, a hit to the world's winning deck as is tradition, Soul Charge, a massive hit to the 3 of staple, Super Poly, a hit to the absolute power play of Shadal, and Glow Up Bulb and Raigeki, both returning from 0, with Raigeki specifically turning many heads as it was still a powerful single-sided board clear, but whether it would see play in a format of Grave Triggers would have to be seen. Newly semi-limited, and all returning from 1, would be Gale, Gores, Ceasefire, and Transmigration Prophecy, all of which had since passed their relevance. Lastly, unlimited were Coach Soldier Wolfbark, Formula Synchron, Magician of Faith, and Rhoda, with many of these turning heads toward previously...
This is a cool thing about that I'm noticing in this video, and I think I noticed it in the previous one as well. They are relatively quick to revert changes that they know are not necessary anymore. Like, I think it was during this year that Wolfbark got limited, and during the same year it goes back because they realized, okay, it's a little past Fire Fist's time, right? You know, it's something that I'm hoping they can do soon as well when they look at something like Sharvara. I'm hoping they can do the same thing with Sharvara. I think sometimes, like, I'm looking specifically at some stuff from TOS format right now. Like, there was no reason for stuff like Gazelle or Harp Horror to be on the ban list for this long, right? I don't really understand why that was the case, right? I don't know. Maybe it's not been that bad outside of these. I don't know exactly. I can't think of other examples right now. But like specifically, Harp Horror and Gazelle were like on there for way too long.
Rogue to unplayable strategies. YCS Dallas would be the first event after this list, taking place on October 5th.
To
being
sell
another
new
top
product?
16
No, but that's the thing, right? Look at this is the first event after this list, and people are still not going back to playing Fire Fist, right? And the same thing is true right now. If they bring back Sharvara now, people are not gonna go and play Unchained in masses and ignore the new cards. Like, some people might play Unchained, but not that many. It's completely fine.
And once again, the Duelist Alliance decks would take almost all of the representation, being 31 of the top 32. Billy Break would be crowned the winner after draft, piling his way to top 16 with a 60-card control pile, being a hybrid between Shadal and Burning Abyss, with Curry Bandit providing heavy milling between them.
I say let's go because it's Billy winning, but what the fuck is this?
Marking the player's third YCS win.
Beginning of the end is base, though.
Following this, the next Shonen Jump promo would be released, being Ebon Illusion Magician.
It sounds giga fun, though. It sounds giga fun.
Rank 7, able to detach to summon a normal spellcaster from deck, obviously intended to summon Dark Magician. In addition, it can also banish an opponent's card when a normal spellcaster attacks. This wouldn't be relevant at the time being, but a point worth noting here is that Ebon's alternative summoning method was, at the time, not possible to perform in the TCG of overlaying onto a rank 6 spellcaster, as the card this was intended to work with, Maji Maji Magician Gal, was never imported to the TCG due to Kazuki Takahashi, the creator of Yugioh and the artist behind the card, refusing for censorship to occur on it, which would have had to happen for the TCG's localization policies at the time. This would lead into the next structure deck a few weeks later, and if there was anything poised to do something about the absolute dominance of Duelist Alliance meta, I'm not sure this was it.
Wait, what is this? Oh, new
Yugioh Rampage. Release date, October 17th, 2014.
That was not
Set
it.
type, structure deck. Major strategies, Yugioh. Impact, making a tier 3 deck cheap. Yugioh Rampage would be the third and final.
I think it had some new cards that were actually good. Like, there's some cards in here, had they been out earlier in the year, they would have been insane. Like I think Yugioh Attacker or something like that is pretty good. Or Yugioh Augur as well. I'm not sure, but like, it was just too late.
structure deck of the year, being aimed at supplying support back to Yugioh, who up until very recently were an extremely capable deck in the metagame. Their new support here included Attacker, who could pop spell traps up to the number of Yugiohs you control when flipped, able to flip itself back down, Augur, who searches a level 4 Earth Machine on
Augur's
normal,
the good one.
Mark III, able to special a Yugioh from hand or grave when summoned by a Yugioh card effect, and Yugioh Gear Gigant XG, a 3-material rank 3 that can detach a material when a machine battles to negate all face-up effects from the opponent and stun their effects for the attack, recurring a Yugioh when sent to grave. These pieces were fairly hit or miss overall, with XG specifically being just too cumbersome to get out due to needing 3 level 3s to access, though the other 3 would find their own spaces in the existing deck. Reprints here included the entire Yugioh core and Card Trooper, which made the deck extremely cheap and easy to obtain for newer players, though it wouldn't be as successful as the new Duelist Alliance strategies. Speaking of new players though, another reprint set would be released just a week later, and this one was set to be a little hit or miss, but would reprint a few cards everyone needed now.
No one needed Vanity's Emptiness.
Legendary Collection 5Ds. Release date, October 24th, 2014. Set type, reprint set. Major strategies, the 5D staples. Impact, reprinting a Buggy Boy in a Floodgate. Legendary Collection 5Ds is a weird one to talk about in retrospect solely because almost none of its reprints were actually relevant to the meta with the exception of exactly 2, which were sorely needed at this point. Maxi and Vanity's Emptiness were those reprints, as both had exploded in
Vanity's
usefulness.
Emptiness at the time I think was a €20 common. €20 common!
Over the course of the last few months and were starting to reach higher prices, so the reprints were greatly appreciated, but left the rest of the set
30?
feeling like a bit of an unfocused mess for the time. Reprints here included Effect Veiler, Stardust Dragon,
I don't know, man, I borrowed it.
Formula Synchron, 1-for-1, Starlight Road, Battle Fader, Crimson Blader, Blow Up Bulb, Black Rose Dragon, the Blackwing Core, TG Hyper Librarian, and Shooting Quasar Dragon, which was the first EU legal printing of the Synchro boss. YCS London would be held the same weekend, and unsurprisingly, we'd see no movement outside of the Duelist Alliance decks further solidifying their hierarchy structure, with Marcel Barberi taking the event on Shadal. This takes us to the final core set of the year, and realistically, a meta shakeup wouldn't be here since the Duelist Alliance decks were certain to be getting new support, but maybe a new deck would be able to rise up into the heavily culled landscape. The new challengers. Release date, November 7th, 2014. Set type, core set. Major strategies, Cliffort, Shadal, Burning Abyss. Impact, more fuel on the fire. New challengers, being the follow-up set to Duelist Alliance, was bound to be an impactful one, bringing both new archetypes to the metagame as well as boosting the power levels of previously introduced ones.
I have a very polarizing relationship with Denko Sekka, because I loved it at the time, because you would use it to slaughter rogue decks. Then I hated it during my Paleo arc, and now I've won a YCS with it again. So I don't know how to feel about Denko Sekka. I still hate her for what she did to me during Paleo format, but yeah.
Got 2 new archetypes worth talking about. The first one being Fluffle, a new fusion archetype that was actually 3 different archetypes rolled into one, being Fluffle, Edgemp, and Frightfur. With this initial wave, we received Edgemp Sabers, able to summon itself from grave by stacking a card in hand on top.
Hello, what deck would you recommend for a new player, which is not too expensive? What are we recommending at the moment, chat, that's not too expensive? Runic, Marincess, Sword Soul. Maybe Fire King Tri-Brigade? Yeah. Yeah. Fluandereeze. I mean, Fluandereeze, it depends a little bit on what you're trying to do, right? Because Fluandereeze is one of the decks that, yes, it's cheap. Yes, it's good. But it's not going to teach you that much. I guess it teaches you a little bit. It's all right. Yeah. One of those options, I would say. Shoutouts to the person saying Snake Eyes. That's funny.
Top of the deck. Bear, able to be sent from hand to grave to set a toy vendor from deck, able to tribute itself to recur a polymerization from grave to hand. Dog, able to search a Fluffle monster or Edgemp Sabers on summon. Owl, able to search polymerization on summon, able to pay 500 while on field to fusion summon a Frightfur. Cat, able to recur a polymerization from grave to hand when used as fusion material. Frightfur Bear, a fusion of Fluffle Bear and Edgemp Sabers, able to equip monsters it destroys in battle to itself, boosting by 1,000 for each. Frightfur Wolf, a fusion of Sabers and any number of Fluffles, able to attack once for each material used. And Toy Vendor, a continuous spell that can discard 1 to draw a card, reveal it, and if it's a Fluffle monster, summon a monster from hand, otherwise discard it, able to search a Fluffle or Edgemp Sabers when sent to grave. While interesting on release, Fluffle would move to do very little initially, with almost all relevance for the time being relegated to Wolf's OTKs. which saw some minor rogue level play at the time, but would be an archetype to watch over the coming years. The other archetype was Clifford, a series of machine pendulums that are mostly able to be summoned without tributes, dropping their level and attack values when you do, are unaffected by monster effects of an equal or lower level if normal summoned, and having some form of effect when either tributed or tribute summoned. This initial wave included Scout, a normal monster scale 9 pendulum who can pay 8 to search for a Klee card from deck while in the scale, Carrier, who bounces a monster on field when tributed, Helix, who pops a spell trap when tributed, Disc, who summons 2 Klees from decks if tribute summoned, popping them in the end phase.
This is 2014 Eldritch, by the way. If anyone's wondering, if you haven't played back then, that's the perfect comparison. This is 2014 Eldritch.
Able to attack twice and pierce.
Because it was just basically an advantage engine that could print monsters, and it had great synergy with all kinds of different floodgates. Period. That's what it was. It's like that. It's 2014 Eldritch.
If tribute summoned. Towers, the only non-pendulum in the archetype, requiring 3 tributes to summon, is unaffected by spells, traps, and activated monster effects with a lower level or rank, drops all special summon monsters by 500 attack, and makes your opponent send a card from hand or field to grave of their choice once per turn. And Sacrifice, an equipped spell that boosts by 300, makes the monster unable to be destroyed in battle, treats that monster as 2 tributes for a Klee summon, and searches a Klee monster when sent to grave. Clifford on release was immediately recognized as the first truly good pendulum strategy, but rather than what pendulums would be known for being their primary trait, Klees would effectively use pendulum summoning as a means to an end, summoning out material to tribute over for their boss monsters.
So
most commonly,
that's the thing. From a conceptual standpoint, I like Clifford because it tries to take a different spin on the pendulum mechanic, by basically using them as like tribute fodder and stuff like that. Like that was okay in my book. Like I thought that was cool even. And I still think to this day, they should try and make that more often, to make pendulum cards that work a little bit differently, you know, have some creativity with the pendulum stuff and don't make it all just like one freaking like pendulum spam or pile, whatever. Like maybe Valmonica. I haven't played much Valmonica, but they look cool from the design. I don't think they're very good, unfortunately. With Clifford, the only problem is that they made them so synergistic with floodgates. That was basically the issue, in my opinion. Because I have no issue with the idea behind it. You know, let's make a pendulum deck that works a little bit differently. You know, make like scales that don't allow you to pendulum summon other stuff. That was cool. It's just the execution wasn't ideal, let's say it like that.
For Towers, being one of the strongest monsters in the game at this point, as it was almost completely unoutable.
Valence
so
was
this
so
discovery
close.
would actually be kept
Maybe
under wraps for a few months. Because of this, as well as their ability to go back to normal attack values under skill drain, Clifford would find a place in the meta almost immediately as a stun strategy, which we'd see with the next YCS. Satellar Knight would receive a couple of new support pieces here in Sirius, who provided a Pot of Avarice-like effect, shuffling back 5 Teller Knights from grave to draw 1 on summon, being a critical piece of the deck by reloading their key resources like Altair, and Triver, a 3-material Teller Knight locked rank 4 that bounces
You say critical piece. I don't think anyone has ever summoned Sirius against me.
Entire field on summon except for itself, able to detach 1 to hand rip the opponent for 1 card, reviving a Teller Knight from grave and sent to the grave while it still had material. While this would be an incredibly powerful second wave for the deck, plugging multiple holes in their strategy,
was good.
Teller Knight would continue to be the weakest of the 3 Duelist Alliance strategies with meta relevance, which would become apparent over the next few YCSs. Shadal would receive a couple of new fusion pieces in Grista, the Fire Fusion that can negate a special summon by sending a Shadal card from hand to grave with the same fusion float effect as normal, Shekinaga, the Earth Fusion who can negate the effects of a special summon monster and destroy them by sending a Shadal from hand to grave, and has the standard fusion floating effect, as well as the new fusion spell in El Shadal.
Is Shekinaga just construct being tied to like a Clifford Towers or something like that? I've never thought of it like that. I never looked at it in that much detail. Yes? Okay. I don't know how I feel about that.
Fusion, a quick play spell with the standard fusion conditions. While very unassuming, Shekinaga and El Shadal Fusion would be almost instantly slotted in, with Mathematician filling the Earth requirements and El Fusion providing a pseudo tag out option for your fusions to dodge removal and disruption. Yang Xing would receive a couple of new pieces here too in Zhao, a tuner with the standard float effect and can, if you control no other monsters, discard 2 Yang Xing cards to summon a Yang Xing with 0 attack and another with 0 defense from the deck. Talti, a dark non-tuner who makes his synchro unable to be stolen by the opponent, and Yazi, a level 7 synchro that can't be targeted with effects, can pop a Yang Xing and another card the opponent controls once per turn, and if destroyed floats into any worm in the deck. While still not meta, this support would iron out a lot of the early game issues Yang Xing faced, giving the deck an instant starter thanks to Zhao 2's swarming effect. Burning Abyss would receive a second wave of support here in Alec, who negates a monster's effect that turn when sent to grave, Calcab, who bounces a set spell or trap when sent to grave, Rubik, a Burning Abyss tuner monster.
To be fair, it didn't really matter what these did. It was just important that they were more names. They just needed more names. The effects on these were barely relevant.
and Virgil, a level 6 synchro that can discard a BA to spin away an opponent's card once per turn, able to draw a card if destroyed. This wave would be well received by the strategy, namely in that any monsters that had the BA summon condition and BA name would have been well received, with Rubik and Virgil doing numbers for the strategy and the other two seeing one of play occasionally. UA would also receive another new wave in Midfielder, being a no tribute UA that can bounce a different UA to summon a UA from hand on a quick effect, Goalkeeper, who can prevent a UA from being destroyed once per turn on a quick effect, and Powered Jersey, an equipped spell that boosts a UA by 1000 and doubles the damage it deals in battle against monsters, returning to hand if the equipped UA is bounced. While this wouldn't make UA meta, it would fill a major hole in the strategy thanks to Midfielder being able to trigger Stadium Search on the first turn, which would let the strategy see minor rogue level play. Moving into the one-offs, Denkoseko would be a level 4 that locks spells and traps from being set or activated while set while on the field, being an instant staple for Shadal.
It's such a dope card. Even with my paleo PTSD, it's such a cool card.
Decks for stunning back row and potentially being used for Construct Summon, forming a variant of the deck known as Denko Dolls. Herald of Ultimateness was a level 12 ritual that could discard a fairy to negate any spell, trap, monster effect, or inherent special summon of a monster, being effectively a better version of the previously released Herald of Perfection, not seeing play now but being experimented with over time. Herald of the Arclight was a level 4 synchro that could tribute itself to negate any spell, trap, or monster effect, provides a macro effect to monsters sent from hand or deck to grave, and if sent to grave, searches a ritual monster or spell, being experimented with for its field effects for now. Dark Rebellion Exceeds Dragon was a rank 4 that could detach 2 materials to seal half the attack of an opponent's monster permanently, seeing staple play in various rank 4 strategies. Oasis of Dragon Souls was a continuous trap that effectively acted as a Call the Haunted that summoned in defense mode and made the summoned monster a worm, seeing play in Satellar Knight for being copies 4, 5, and 6 of Call. Solemn Scolding was a counter trap that operated just like Solemn Judgment with the condition of paying 3,000 and having to be the only card set to activate, seeing some experimentation thanks to the power of that effect. Fusion Substitute was a TCG exclusive whose name's always treated as polymerization, can only be used using materials on the field, and can be banished engraved to return a Fusion engraved to the extra deck and draw one, seeing some experimentation as a polymerization substitute for some strategies in the short term, but
I mean, if they made this thing, unironically, if they just made it so you could fuse from hand or field, it would be a strictly better polymerization. That would have been kind of cool though. I don't know. The fact that it needs to be from field kind of makes it bad. It was good in Zodiac specifically, but outside of that, it never really got to do anything.
Eventually finding a home as a combo piece a few years from now. Lastly, number 39, Utopia Beyond, was a rank 6 that could drop all opponents' monsters to 0 attack on Exceed Summon, and could detach a material to banish an Exceed you control and revive a Utopia monster and gain 1,250 life points, seeing play in rank 6 strategies for its summon effect. Following 2 weeks later would be the Noble Knights of the Round Table box set, which would bring a couple of new cards to the Noble Knight strategy in Merlin.
I mean, you say they didn't want to replace it, but at the same time, it does share the same name, so you can't play both in the same deck at 3. It's not legal, right? It has the Harpy ruling to it, right? Where it has the same name, so you can't play both. I think that's the point. Yeah, so it is a replacement.
Bedveer, and Last Chapter, but none of these would do anything to push Noble Knights into the meta, though would provide reprints of various cards in an exclusive platinum rarity that would never be used again after this. With
I wonder why they never brought that rarity back.
Reprints of Honest, Valor, Dark Hole, MST, Rhoda, Book of Moon, Foolish Burial, Gold Sark, Forbidden Lance, Call the Haunted, Deep Prison, Warning, Torrential, and Compulse. YCS Anaheim would take place 3 days after this on November 24th.
Oh, I thought it was perfectly split by 3. I guess that's not possible in top 32, but then freaking Satella ruins my day.
The final top 16 sealed event of the year, and though the duels to
11, 10, 9, 2, yeah.
Alliance decks would once again take large chunks of representation in the top 32, Clifford had rapidly risen to second place in representation, utilizing stun tools to take advantage of the Clifford summon conditions, but also using Trampolinks, who could
Dude, Dust Tornado? Why is there Dust Tornado? What the hell? Why are you so mad about back row? Okay.
Provide the low scale for
someone is really worried of the mirror match, I'll tell you that. Triple MST, triple Dust Tornado, triple Spell Shattering Arrow. Holy.
Summoning using Scout, then bounce the Scout with its scale effect to allow another Clifford search in the same turn, thanks to Scout being a soft once per turn. Patrick Hoban would win the event in the draft top cut, piloting to top 16 using Burning Abyss, who did not publish his deck list from this event, marking his second YCS win and third major event win overall following Toronto this year and the NAWCQ the previous year. YCS Milan would be held 2 weeks later, and with the adjustments from the new challengers, Satellar Knight had completely fallen out of the top 32.
I don't want to talk about YCS Milan. I do not want to talk about YCS Milan. I got destroyed on feature match by freaking 6 Samurai.
And the rest was split between BA, Shadal, and Clifford. Danielle Stella would take the event on Clifford, playing the standard Clifford lines as well as the now staple Trampolinks for his build. YCS Sydney 2 would be the following.
If you're wondering, like, hey, why 6 Samurai out of all things? It hasn't appeared in the entire video. No one played that. Yeah, exactly. I lost round 1, and I had a feature match in round 2 against Super Heavy Samurai, so I was 0-2. I almost came back from it. I went like 5-2 or 6-2 and then lost round 9, I think. Well, yeah.
Weekend on December 14th and would be the final YCS of the year, but unfortunately very little is known about this event due to the loss of data from the official Yugioh website changeover, causing us to not know any of the top 32 from this event. Peter Mitchell would take the event on Shadal, using both Denko Seka and the artifacts to provide the lights for Construct Summon. And this would mark an end to the events of 2014 in the history of the Yugioh trading card game, with the meta fairly stable between Shadal, Burning Abyss, and Cliff Forts.
That's 2014 for y'all. Ironically, even though it's the year where I won my first YCS and it is very often regarded to as a really cool year, I don't actually like hat. I mean, it's just because I don't like hat format that much. The rest of it was still pretty cool, but I don't like hat format as much as people basically make it out to be. Like I don't think it's as good as people make it out to be, but other than that, it was still a pretty dope year. Yeah, that was cool. Make sure, as always, if you enjoy these types of videos, I think, oh no, there's already a pinned comment. Go to the pinned comment and give some love to the Law Yugioh. Appreciate you for making these. Always a pleasure to watch.